You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Brumley.
I can't tell you how many times that's happened in my life.
It's just the R just randomly goes silent. I did not want anybody out here thinking that Brad is a bum. Brad is a good guy.
It wouldn't be the worst thing I've ever been called.
Hey, I call bums the expert minimalists because they don't care about anything. They can just, they live on the street, man.
Ooh, I never thought about it that way. That's a unique perspective there.
If you change your perspective on things, it sometimes can make it look a lot better.
That's true. Yeah. Gonna write that one down.
What do you do professionally, Brad?
So professionally, I am a business analyst at a mortgage company, which is actually a lot more interesting than it might sound on the surface. I help implement software enhancements. I test applications, and I implement like automations and bots to kind of speed up the mortgage process. But my passion projects are podcasting, running, hiking, that kind of stuff.
This brings into a weird thought of mine. When we talk about bots and we talk about all these things, that brings into a whole new aspect of views and analytics that goes in with podcasting.
Oh yeah, that's it's crazy, and it's by the look of your episode count, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, but it seems like uh, the technology has just catapulted in this field over the last few years.
Well, how long have you been podcasting?
Uh, Not 2 years yet. It's maybe like a year and a half or so.
I'm at a year and a half too.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
you're cranking out these episodes. Like, what are you at 300?
Yeah, I post one every day.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah,
I,
a lot of them are just, I mean, they're just conversations, which I think makes it pretty easy. Like it gets difficult, like if you're focusing on a topic, like much like you kind of do too, you you focus on a topic, but you do like 15, 20-minute episodes. Mine's just a conversation with a person for like an hour. You know what I mean? It's just like,
right.
there's not really a lot of work put into it. It's just taking the time to have one, be able to spark up an interest and see where it goes. You might learn someone plays ping pong in the Tibetan mountains or some dude's fishing in the Alaska River. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's I'm loving your stuff. I'm getting caught up on it. Obviously, with that much content, it's going to take me a while, but I'm loving all the interviews that you do. Like you say, more conversations and interviews.
Yes, I always tell people when they're like, "Thanks for the interview." I was like, "Conversation, conversation." So, what exactly is the most interesting thing you've probably talked about? I mean, the Coffee Buzz podcast is what it's called.
Correct. Yeah, and when I started it, I really didn't know what direction I was going to take it. I knew that the consistent for me is my addiction or fascination with coffee. So that's sort of a jumping off point. And then from there, in the early days, I was trying to do a few interviews, but that was kind of hard to coordinate with my schedule. And so I just turned it into a solo podcast where I sometimes would talk about conspiracy theories or, plant-based diet. Recently, I've been kind of fascinated with the power of our subconscious mind and just the programming that we receive from an early age, like up to age 7. Everybody is just installing software into us, beliefs on life and money and relationships, things like that, and how it's sort of up to the person to question whether or not those programs are really serving us anymore.
Dude, that's a that's got my mind racing. I took psychology. What we actually looked at that is called environmental influences. And that goes into a big part about what makes a person. I don't think anybody really understands that your environment kind of can shape you in a way too. Um, Such as you take a good person, or you take, let's say, two twins. You put one in a good home with a rich life where he gets everything handed to him. Now he can choose to do good with all of that, or he can choose to be spoiled rotten, gold spoon in the mouth type style. And then you take the other twin and throw him into a bad home, a bad lifestyle, rundown neighborhood, whatever you want to say. Um, he could go the good way by getting himself out of there, working hard, and then getting that, and then going the bad route, which is the most common when you're in that type of situation, and just, live a bad life. All our environmental influences really pack our shape and movement of our minds, such as like, when you're growing up, who do you look to the most when you're a kid?
I would have to say, for me, it wasn't so much my parents because they were very young. They were like 18 years old when I was born. Definitely not a planned thing. So I sort of drew experiences from the older relatives that I had, like grandparents and older uncles and things like that.
Exactly. You look for a parenting figure, but you really aim for someone that's older than you because when we're taught when we're kids is that who has the most knowledge in the world? Adults do. They're grown up.
Exactly.
That's it. And then like I don't know how many times like I look back on like childhood field trips I went on and I was like, "Wait a minute. Like my teacher was only 24. I thought he knew everything. I thought since he was an adult, he had all the answers." He goes, "He probably didn't even know shit."
That's so true. Yeah, like you were saying, sometimes bums on the street will have you know, an insight that someone who is very successful won't have. And
I
and
I
in
can't really give myself credit for saying that one because that was actually a bum I ran into in Hawaii. Um, yeah, I came across a bunch of bums because people are choose to be homeless in Hawaii because it's so nice. You don't really have to
oh, yeah,
ever.
that makes sense.
Yeah, well, all the hotels, everything, they have like fake golf turf or they'll have some type of like pool or something. And it's really nice weather. I mean, you can practically live outside. It does rain a lot, but it's not like hard rain, it's a light rain. But I remember I saw a bunch of bums with a bunch of maps laid out on the street by the bathrooms in this park and I was walking by, then grabbed something to drink from the fountain, and they're all sitting there talking about the softest curbs in each neighborhood. Like the curbs had a different texture, and I thought it was so weird. And I remember like walking by, and I was like gonna hand him some change or something. He was like, "I don't need that." I was like, I figured, you're homeless. I was gonna give you some money, maybe help you get on your feet or something. He was like, "I'm an expert minimalist. That's what I am." I'm like,
Ah, yeah.
oh, you get to but that's true though. Homeless people do have some of the biggest insight. And a lot of people go, "Oh, if they have the biggest insight, why don't they get a job?" It's like, don't you understand? They're seeing stuff from the ground up. Do you know what happens to our minds when we get surrounded by objects and money? We get
Mhm.
clouded vision.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, and it's you're talking about the curbs. It seems like everybody is an expert at something. And,
Yeah. I think like you brought into a good perspective point too. Like not having your a parent or maybe something like that. Like a lot of those times sometimes you have that influence in there and you choose to structure yourself the wrong way. Like nobody really knows how to structure themselves.
it's true, and, the when you said the environment, it kinda made me think of, a lot of people think that's just the literal environment you have around you, but what I've come to realize is that environment also encapsulates, like, the mindset that you have and your attitude, like, what's going on inside, the voices that you tell the things that you tell yourself all day.
Yeah, if you get surrounded by a bunch of people that are making fun of you or calling yourself names or getting bullied or something, you're going to have a very distorted perception of who you are. You know, it's it has its ups and its downs when it comes to how you got to pull yourself out of a situation. Like, not to turn it into a motivational thing, but the reason why motivational speakers are able to come from that perspective is because they went through a hard point themselves and somebody pulled them out of it. A lot of the times, the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't seem like it's ever going to be there.
Right. Yeah, it's true. I think that's one of the things that drew me into the world of IT, maybe on a subconscious level, was that, dealing with program software and things of this nature, I drew a parallel to the, how I could approach self development from a technical standpoint. Um, changing the beliefs in my mind. So not to get all Tony Robbins on everybody, but that's sort of the way that it manifested in my life.
Yeah, well, if you look at, computers and you look at people, people can be programmed too.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's definitely hacks and stuff that we can do to help fix a situation. We only use medication as like a hack to get over a disorder, but a disorder you can consider it like a virus, or you can consider it like a debug or a bug in a programming.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's crazy because it actually goes into what you were saying earlier about conspiracy theories. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the government experiment. Oh God, what was it called? MK Ultra.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's not a government conspiracy. That's an actual like project that went down. But there's a thing when they were testing a while back on people with severe disorders such as schizophrenia. And I read a couple accounts of the people that were involved in it. And one dude had this deep account where he was talking about how they would cut off all of his auditory and like everything, like put earmuffs on, so all of his senses were kind of cut off. They would throw him into like a grave or a hole, and they would fill it with snakes. And he
Oh
was
my
given
God.
he was given medication to where he was paralyzed, so he couldn't move his body. He just had to sit there and suffer. And nobody would believe that the government was doing this because they wouldn't believe someone that was had a mental disorder. So it was literally like perfect for them.
Oh
And
wow.
it's crazy to see because now what they use for schizophrenia, where it used to be ECT. I don't know if you ever heard of ECT before.
Oh yeah. Electroshock therapy, right?
That's the was the only known cure for schizophrenia, because when those electrical impulses or those disorders would rise, they would shock your brain to make sure you don't do that, much like if you touch a light bulb and after a minute your hand burns, you learn not to touch a light bulb again. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
So that's how they kind of trick the brain to be able to fix it. Well, now they're doing something with magnets called I think transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it literally it's way safer, way better, and there's no severe risk to it, and it helps cure schizophrenia. Like, we're
Oh wow.
slowly learning the process of being able to fix things in a better situation.
That's very good because I actually had a roommate back in college and he was borderline suicidal and he would go and get electroshock therapy treatments. And when he would come back, it was like he was a ghost. And I just couldn't imagine like how bad his condition must have been to where he would just keep going back for that. So it's I'm glad they're making improvements in that process.
Usually when people are like interested in this type of subject, they have something going on with themselves. Like, do you have something about yourself that you had to look into?
Never anything like that. I was diagnosed with cancer back in 2001, and it was Hodgkin's lymphoma. I think it was like stage 2, and it definitely affected my mental state. Before I had suffered from depression, and it was kind of strange because when I got hit with that diagnosis, all of a sudden these problems that I thought I had all my life just seemed really insignificant. My whole world just sort of shrank, and I focused in, on the present moment of the reality that I had this cancer. And so I had to do 6 months of chemo, 6 months of radiation, and luckily fully cured. They tell me, but it was a life changing event.
I'm glad you're all right, man. Holy crap. Yeah, but what you're saying about being able to, like, all your problems being minimalized because of that incident, that happens all the time. And what's crazy is we as people are not very good problem solvers. I think that's for the majority. When I mean, like, there's always something that can overwhelm us. Me, I can be easily overwhelmed pretty easily. But like, I had a giant car incident where I literally had to replace 3 tires in a matter of a month.
Oh
So
wow.
I put over $800 into my car with towing and everything. And then only a week later for my whole battery just to blow up in my car to where I had to get a new one back in November. And that was literally a grand and a half in a month. And I'm the
Oh.
type of guy where spending $5 on a t-shirt is way too much money because like for environmental influences. I grew up in a house where both my parents worked, so I learned to kind of save my money and kind of be able to stock up in case, one day I don't have it. You know what I mean? Be able to save, save, save in case something happens down the line. Be protected, be safe.
Mhm.
And that was all from me growing up that I've learned to install into my life now. But when I experienced that car incident, I was literally like, fuck this, fuck that. I'm tired of this. Is this all that life is? I went to someone close to me and was like, "Is this what life is? Like, is it just nothing but payments and payments and payments?" And then I was expecting the therapeutic answer, like, "No, it's gonna get better. It's gonna be okay." No, I got straight up, "Yep, life sucks." I'm like, and that didn't help me, and I ended up calling this, I guess Geico Insurance, shout out to them, but, the woman that answered the phone, I was telling her, and it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, "Yeah, I just need a tow, my car's in the driveway, take your time, the store doesn't or the whatever garage isn't open until, like, 8 a.m., so we're good," and she goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I'm really not," and she goes, if you look to God, and I'm not a religious guy, and I was like, I
Mhm.
get it. And I'm just saying, yeah, yeah, because I understand what she's trying to do. She's trying to help out. And I'm like, I'm not really religious, but I really appreciate you. And she goes, you know what? You're not religious? Well, guess what? She goes, life sucks, but it does get better. You got to go through the hard times to get to the good times. And I'm like, damn, that's a good answer. And then,
Yeah.
next thing you know, I got over it a week later. I got over it. I moved past it. And I look back on it and I'm like, I don't know why I was so upset, but it's hard to get yourself to that form of clarity when you're in a moment of pain.
Sure, yeah, because that's like you said, that's what humans kind of focus in on, is that pain is a more acute emotion or sensation than I think joy is. Uh, n- that's why all the songs that are written are usually, songs of heartbreak and loss. Like there's very few that are about being happy. I mean, there's some great songs about that, but if you were to look at the breakdown, I mean, pain is a bigger motivator for humans. And maybe it's like you said, like I never thought about this, but inherently maybe we're not good problem solvers.
Well, music is the weird thing too, because what makes it so attractive to people is the amount of emotion it can evoke out inside of you. Like if you're feeling down in a hole, you're listening to fucking Alice in Chains. If you're listening, if you want to get pumped up, you're listening to like Kiss, or you're listening to some rock like hardcore riff. And then if you're feeling just like bopping your head type music, you're listening to something pop or something that's on the radio. They learn to capture literally a legit emotional feel that can get installed inside of you. And we have music for different moods and different tones. It brings into a whole new perspective of hacking the mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know a lot of people make fun of the law of attraction, but there's science behind it actually working. And like you said, music and just the content you consume on a more broad level has a huge influence on your mindset and the things that occur in your reality.
Yeah. And when you talk about your podcast being a self improvement for the subconscious mind, how do you usually try and tackle that? Because when you start talking about the subconscious mind, there's just so many factors.
Right, there is. And for years, I would read a book and think a self-help book, as most people would call it, and I would understand it on an intellectual level. I would know that this concept worked, but I never could implement it. And that's because I was trying to solve the problem through my thinking mind, and I wasn't actually incorporating the subconscious mind. Um, there's different brain waves that we experience, and the theta brain state is sort of like right before we drift off to sleep, and that is where you have the most opportunity to influence your subconscious mind, and that's when you can install the programs. Typically the last 10 minutes of the day, in my opinion, is the most important part of the whole day. And what most people do in that 10 minutes is ruminate on all of the things that went wrong, or how they failed. And I've tried to flip the script on that a bit and start talking to myself about what I want to happen and how grateful I am of the things that did work out that day, and how I want to project the things I want to project into the future.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm a big like I'm obsessed with the human mind, but I really got a fascination when my buddy told me he slept with his eyes open.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's something I had to kind of find out on my own. I was actually hanging out with him at his house, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know he was asleep, and he looked like he was still up. And I'm talking to him for like a good hour, and he just randomly goes and goes like that, like when you wake somebody up. And I'm like, "What the hell was that?" He goes, "I was sleeping, dude." I was like, "What? Like, how long were you asleep?" He goes, "I don't know. I went to bed at like 12." And he looks at the clock, goes, "Oh, it's like 3 right now." I'm like, "Dude, I've been talking to you for hours." He's like, "I wasn't answering, was I?" I was like, "No." And I was like, "That actually," so I was kind of talking to myself. And I'm like, "So you sleep with your eyes open?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You got to warn somebody when you do that." And he goes, "Yeah, I've always had this problem." And it's weird for me because I'm an insomniac. So
Mm,
I don't sleep, you know. I think the only time I ever get sleep, I'm woken up by like what you're thinking of the last 10 minutes of the day where you're thinking about all the bad stuff and all reflecting back. I think of like, oh shit, remember in third grade when I had to give that speech and I almost crap myself in front of the class? That's just an example. That didn't actually happen. But
yeah.
like
Sure.
I get thoughts like that, like playing like dodgeball or doing something where I embarrassed myself somewhere in my life. I'm like, "Oh, I said that to her. I should have said this." And I had those moments in the middle of the night, but it caused me to look into sleep a little bit more. And it brought into this weird topic that came across when I was looking into sleep called nightmares. And I
Mm,
always wondered what nightmares were because if you look at a nightmare, any monster or anything that gets stuck in your head, like holy shit, or a person's face you see in a dream, you've seen that before.
right.
Your brain has no power to make a new face, make a new monster. It just uses bits and pieces of information it's gathered throughout the day and randomizes it and makes it into something. So you can't physically create anything or you can't mentally create something in your mind, such as like a new monster or something. You just take bits and pieces of others and form it into something. Now, when I looked at nightmares, there's a weird way to overcome them. To overcome a nightmare, what you do is as soon as you wake up, you write down your whole entire nightmare, everything about it, and you look at it. And it turns out a lot of those things are problems that are happening in your own life. Anything that really involves drowning or something like that in a body of water or something is usually a fear for that you have a lot of problems built up into your head that are overflowing and you're drowning in your problems. When we go to bed at night, a lot of people when they walk in the door from work, they have a tense amount of stress I call microfractures. These are little stress fractures are like cracks in a window pane or a window pane. So you're not addressing those. When you come home and you don't think about them, you just tend to ignore them like, oh, I don't want to talk about my day. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I just want to go to bed. When you go to sleep, you're not addressing those cracks. You're just putting a
Mm.
band-aid on top of it. And after a while, a week or two later, you're going to break down and that glass is going to break because the problems on your shoulders become too immense that you can't get out of it.
Yeah, the house always wins, right? I mean, you got to deal with your stuff, and if you just try to suppress it, it's gonna come out. It's gonna manifest, like you said, those nightmares. I never thought about the not manifest or not seeing anything new. You've already pictured that or experienced that for it to occur in your nightmare. It's kind of like a data dump
Yeah.
of all the things that maybe we haven't dealt with or we prefer not to talk about.
Well, people always bring up the concept of like they'll say to me like you talk a lot about technology and society into your podcast and I'm like I don't ever really try and bring it that way. It's just a question that's on all of our minds like how many times you go to the store and get a default answer? How many times you go somewhere and you get an autopilot response like, "How's your day going?" "Oh, it's going good." And they just keep on walking. Like
Mm,
nobody's getting into conversation anymore. That's kind of
right.
the reason why I started this thing was let's throw down the shields. Let's take the armor off. Let's just talk and see where it goes. Nobody's attacking anybody. Nobody has to agree with anybody. We're just understanding life and trying to figure out from everybody's perspective. I've talked to people that think There's a flat earth. I've talked to people there's that are hardcore into religion. I've talked to people that lost to their religion. I haven't agreed or said anything. I just try and bring the other person's perspective in. It never has to be an agreement and never has to be an argument, but understanding where someone's train of thoughts have came from is one of the most important things. I'm not a big fan when people come on and they just want to play a character. They don't want to do this. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm not trying to attack you. I just want to make sure I'm having a conversation with a real person that is able to show that. Because when you're playing a character, when you're doing something like that, you can't keep it up for like an hour. And it gets difficult because then you start to break character because you're not being your true self. And I feel like as people, when we walk around the world, we're afraid to show who our true selves are.
Oh yeah, people are afraid to expose that vulnerability because like you said, they're not accustomed to it. People don't have real conversations anymore. And it's funny that the technology is enabling us to disconnect even further, where we can sit in our own little information bubble and not talk to the people that maybe, like you said, we might disagree with. Instead, there's all this addiction to outrage, and everybody is real tough behind a computer screen, right? They could say just the meanest things to each other, but when you actually look somebody in the eye, it doesn't matter to me like what their political affiliation is or religious affiliation. You We have much more in common with each other than we do that are different. And it's just so important, like what you're talking about, to actually connect and maybe not just stop at the small talk, the automatic answers that we give each other.
Yeah. Well, I've talked about so many times that the phones need to be away a little bit. I'm at fault for falling on it myself, but when it comes to walking out inside the world, I don't carry my phone around on me like when I go into a grocery store because you lose connection with things around you. You get too involved into the thing. And I've come across the person probably much like yourself. Like you want to talk about someone that says something on top of a screen and writes it, but they won't say it to your face because it's a different when you're in interaction with someone. I've come across people that'll say it to your face. It's not that they hate you, it's just they got an immense amount of shit in their own life going on that they can't handle. I've had a friend of mine or somebody that I've met that just randomly is yelling, and I'm just like, "Hey, man, calm down." Next thing you know, like, "Don't you tell me to cut," and just start going off on me. I'm like, dude, I just look at him. I'm like, what got you to that point? What got you to be like that? And then I walk outside and see that, oh, they have a spare tire on their car. They probably just had a flat and something happened. They probably got a bunch of problems in their own life. When you don't address those problems, they build up. It's like if you take a roadblock and you push it down the road. Next problem arises, you got two roadblocks hitting you now, and then you push it again. Next thing you know, it's too much for you to push back that it all hits you at once and you can't handle it.
Oh yeah, it's all, we're all about like what you were talking about earlier with the medication, just slap a band-aid on it. And we address symptoms instead of the cause of what's really happening there.
Well, it's so simple to prescribe medication to somebody when you don't fully understand what the person's going through. It's really weird when a doctor has a patient for super long, like a couple of years or something. They eventually start to be like, I don't think you should be taking this medication anymore. But when you come with that close interaction, and we look at hospitals now or doctors now, it's very difficult for them to be able to get the one-on-one patient time that they really need to understand what their patient is going through. It's just so simple to prescribe something to them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's, especially with issues like you were talking about insomnia. I mean, I had insomnia for years. And one, but because of the name of my podcast, you might understand I drink a lot of coffee. Well, I've had to cut that way back, but also just getting outside and like you said, disconnecting from our devices. That's one of the reasons that I enjoy getting outdoors to run and long distance running in particular. It just, I have to wear the body out so that I can just be able to go to sleep in 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I do the same thing before I go to bed. I'll do a run or something. I mean, I've worked out every day for 7 years. There's going to be people that are listening, like, we get it, we get it. I'm sorry. I know I always say it, okay, but a lot
No, that's
relates to
something to be
fitness.
proud of. I mean, that's a commitment.
I mean, it's crazy because it cures the demons, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like everyone looks at me like, oh, you're this. Like you seem like you don't even like. I know so many people that have told me like in my life that are just like, oh, you don't have any problems to worry about. I'm like, dude, I suffer from severe depression. I
Hmm.
definitely do. I don't seem like it at all, but it's because I have a fix. I have something that keeps me away from those demons. When I work out, those demons are gone. Before I'm going to the gym, I'm all like thinking about this, I'm all anxious and worried. And much like yourself, you can relate to with running. That fucking cortisol rush you get, a runner's high, that is probably one of those moments. Like if I'm done just getting off the treadmill or something and I'm driving home, you can cut me off, you can flick me off, you can do whatever you want. I'm just in the car like, what up, man? Like I feel like I just smoked like 5 joints. I'm like, I'm ready to get home, man. I don't care, dude. Like, be you, bro.
Right. Nobody could steal your joy at that point.
And it's one of the best feelings in the world, and it brings into a whole nother perspective that we're going in with this world. Like I always talk about kind of the food trend now that everyone's food reviewing, everyone's doing all these weird things
Hmm.
that are going on, and I'm like, because that cortisol rush is the same thing you can kind of get from dopamine that is released in food. This is why
Ah,
addiction becomes a problem, because people are starting to suffer. You're not addressing that. You don't know you're suffering. You understand that, oh, this just happened. I don't have money to pay this bill. And you know what I'm feeling? I'm feeling some Chinese food. The next thing you know, you order Chinese food. Well, that feeds into the monster. Next thing you know, it's like, I get it. Chinese food's good, but next thing you know, you become a food addict. You become, oh, I'm going to go after this. I'm going to go eat this, go eat this. And then you start feeling like shit. And then you start having more self doubt, and which causes you to eat more. It's anything with addiction. A problem leads into that. If you smoke too
absolutely.
much, if you drink too much. I mean, I went to school originally for chemical dependency. I was trying to figure out what can make the brain want to connect with something, and I realized, wait a minute. I mean, we're all addicts. I'm
Yeah.
addicted to the gym. I mean, there's someone
Hmm.
out there probably addicted to pixie sticks.
Oh, for sure. If you can imagine it, someone's addicted to it. I'm recently been reading a book by this neuroscientist, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks about how people are addicted to stress. And that blew me away because I
That's
thought,
oh, that's true, dude. I want you to finish what you're saying, but I got a good point to add to that.
yeah, so he says that like you're talking about that cortisol rush that we get, that the body becomes addicted to that. And so we start looking for ways to get pissed off. And I had never thought about that before then, but it completely changed my view because, in our society, like men can't really express emotion. So I would get angry. I wouldn't get sad or cry, but I would lose my temper. That was my outlet. And come to find out that was an addiction. It blew my mind.
I'm so glad. Wait, so you found that out from reading a book?
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
was it
So
was
I talked to a molecular neuroscience who studies brain chemistry, and I forgot where he's from. His name is Abdallah Al-Dili. He was on my podcast. You might like that one I put up. Um, he was explaining a lot of the neurochemistry and a lot of the things that I talk about with like conversation and isolation with the phones and all these types of things. And everything I was explaining was just from my own experience of the world. So now what you just said about people are attracted to stress. I had a theory on this, which I've said in a podcast prior to this, way, way, way before. So you can find it. So people know I just didn't think of it as you said it. This is why reality television was so fucking popular, because when you
ah,
don't have that stress in your everyday life, you come home, you turn on the TV, and you will find it somewhere else. That's why Jersey Shore was so popular. That's why, because you like seeing that. You like seeing the fake tension. Yeah,
mm,
you need conflict in your everyday life. It sucks to say, I hate to say it, but if you have your whole life for a whole week go perfectly fine every single day, no problems occurring, like, oh, I got to get gas. Nothing like that. If everything's just perfect and bland, you will look for that conflict. You will look for someone to argue with. You will look for it. Some people who argue more than others, such as want that confrontation, who would do like a debate with you, who will want that anger, who would want that be able resentment or that non agreement. That's because they need it more than you do. A lot of people that can just be like, whatever, and they can gloss
mhm.
over it. They still need conflict, but at a slower rate.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Is, you you could win the lottery tomorrow, and if you're an angry person that hated their job and it was horrible, and you've got all these means where you don't have to deal with any stress at all, you'll find it. Like you said, if it's reality TV or it's traffic, you will find a way to get your fix on that cortisol, on that stress hormone.
And that'll happen like if you have your day go perfectly fine, you'll throw your coffee in the microwave for 5 minutes. Next thing you know, you pull it out, you'll take a sip and be like, oh, it's too hot. Then you'll
Hmm.
kind of sip it again, thinking that it's going to be better the second time. Like, even though it's only been a couple seconds, because you want to get that burn, you want that conflict, you want that resistance. We need resistance because resistance is the only thing that causes us to expand and evolve.
Right. No, that's interesting. Yeah, uh I've tried to get rid of that need, for anger and for that cortisol, and I definitely have not mastered it, but and I don't know if you deal with this, but I have incorporated meditation, and it's been a game changer. Do you have any experience with that?
I'm not a big fan of it
Oh,
because
okay.
I can't do it. It's not that I don't want it or I don't understand it. It's just my brain just can't shut off at all. It's just, I did it once with my aunt who's a spiritualist. We talked about it on a podcast we did, about spirit animals and stuff. I
Uh-huh.
went on the beach at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had a wand. I did the dance. I did whatever. I did it fully to completion, not making fun of it at all. But I just
Yeah.
told her I understand it, but I just couldn't. It's not for me.
Right. And I think people can find that place without meditation. That's just one of the vehicles that I use. Running is another one, but for you it might be the gym. That might be your meditation process.
I find sometimes when I get into a good conversation like this, I tend to feel a little bit relaxed, like a form of therapy.
Oh, oh
I th-
yeah.
I've had people come on that just sit there and want to talk about me, 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 me. That's fine. I'm glad to be there for that because I think we all need something. A lot of times, like I wanted to do therapy for a while. I wanted to be a therapist. And one of the most inspirational people that I found out was a therapist was someone I was really close to was my best friend's mom. And she's one of those real therapists. When I mean real, I mean if she can't help you, she'll tell you that and she'll find you someone who can. You
Mm.
know,
She's
I've
not just there to collect the money from you.
Exactly. She's told so many people, like, stopped them in the middle of something after, like, a second session or something, be like, "Look, I think you're just here because you really want someone to talk to, and I understand that, and I can do that for you, but I don't feel right charging you." So she'll
Mm.
refund the person back their money, and then she'll call the person and set down, like, a coffee meeting or something, then they'll just talk as friends. They'll be like that, and she's done it to so many people and helped so many people out. And you're like, well, that's not a good therapist. How is she getting money and how is she getting clients? She just has a better perspective of people. We're all hurting. We're all dying for conversation. We all just want to feel like we're being heard. It's the same thing with social media. I usually talk about like when someone posts something on Facebook. What are they doing? They're probably complaining about something, right? Or they're putting up a meme about depression that you like because you know what you get that feeling. You love that feeling. Like, oh, we like someone looks up in the sky and the sky's like, fuck you, like back at them or something. Then you like it because you're like, I feel like that on the inside. You relate a little bit. It's just because when someone posts something on Facebook to complain about something, they just want to be heard. They want to feel like they're being understood and they want to get that emotion. They want to vent. When you get 7 likes on that post and then you post again, you get 8 likes, then let's say 9 likes the next day and then 10 likes the next day.
Uh,
Well, then you post one day and you only get 3 likes. You delete that post and you don't get that pat of acceptance. You don't feel like you're being understood. You don't feel like anybody's listening to you. And that same emotion and response that you get from Facebook doing that for you is the same thing you used to get before technology hit real big. When you used to talk to a parent, used to talk to a best friend, used to confide in someone that really cared about you.
I can definitely understand what you're talking about there. Those social validators that happen on social media, and this is why people get depressed from all the social media. I think is that what you're saying, at the end of the day, we want to be validated. Maybe we're dealing with, past emotional problems that we didn't get validated enough as a child. So when you post that thing online, and usually it's either bragging or, like you said, complaining. Those seem to be the polar things that I see, the post I see the most. And you only get one like, and you know that everybody has seen it. It crushes people. It's a real thing, just like the dopamine rush when they get 20 or 30 likes.
Well, that response was the same you would get from your parents or a best friend when they would actually listen to you talk. And that feeling feels way more better. It's way more real. But the thing is, it's not that we want to feel validated. It's just we want to be heard. We want to
Right.
feel worth. When you confide to a friend and they're sitting there like, "What are you talking about? You're awesome. You're amazing." That whole positive thing is why people listen to audio tapes that tell them that. It's because
Hmm.
they need it. A lot of times, I mean, most of us are walking around broken, but we're hiding it behind something. And then a lot of us are broken and we can't handle it, and we just start going and screaming at other people, and you can show it off on your sleeve like, "Oh, nobody cares about me." It's Who cares? Like, I'm not saying you don't matter, but I'm saying we're all suffering from something. Bruce Lee said, one of the best quotes ever. God gave you this life because or God gave you this road because you're tough enough to walk it.
Right.
Nobody can fit your problems. I can't wear your shoes. You can't wear my shoes. That's how it works. We were designed for everything that comes up to us. We can set ourselves up for problems, or we can do our best to avoid them. It depends on how you want to live your life is the exact road you choose to take it. If you choose never to pay your bills, IRS is probably coming down. They're taking some of your shit.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to set your life up for success in a world where success is turning into something different. It's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. I mean, you can listen to probably like someone that's close with their parents. Their parents are going to try and invest themselves into their kids. It's going to happen. They're just trying to look out for you. They're trying to see what's best for you. But like so many times, like, you need to go to college, you need to do this. Not really anymore. The world's
Yeah.
changing way too fast. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I my little cousin, he's talking about how they're having all these shooting meetings and all these things at school. I was like, back in the day, there used to just be a fire drill, and the world's changing and evolving. Now you guys have to worry about so much more anxiety levels,
Oh
mental
yeah.
health, all this type of stuff that everybody's starting to be aware of now. It's on the rise because sadly, technology gave bullying a whole new platform.
It's
Bullying,
true.
bullying's good and bullying's bad. Bullying for me in a good way was I would have never joined the gym if I wouldn't have gotten made fun of.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
learned I learned to structure myself off of it, and I've grown from it, and I would never take a day back. But being consistent, doing all that were things that I pulled from it. But if you look at the bad parts of bullying, sometimes people don't understand how much damage they're really doing.
Oh yeah. I mean, just look at the teen suicide rates. They're so much higher than they were 30 years ago before social media, and just suicide rates in general have skyrocketed, along with anti-anxiety and depression medications, over the last 30 years. And you can draw a direct parallel between that and when social media came on board. And it wasn't so much just social media itself, but like you said, it gave bullying a megaphone. It was a lot easier to do. And when it comes to, having problems and being depressed, I I like what one of the authors that I read a lot of, Dr. Wayne Dyer, he said that you can't be in a place of gratitude and stress at the same time. Like those two vibrations can't align. They can't, one has to be, outside of the other. And I don't care who you are, there is something to be grateful for. And I didn't realize this until I spent some time in the chemo lab, because I had a diagnosis that was actually treatable. They had a set thing to do with it, but there was people that would come in that did not have that, rare stomach cancers. They had no, you know, um, no cure for. and you're there just sitting in these recliners with all these people, and you get to know their stories, and you just realize, or I realized, just how fortunate I was. And it really puts things in perspective, and how grateful it just affected me in a way where I try to just wake up grateful now.
It's hard to see that too. Like a lot of people, it's hard to be grateful of what you have when your problems are so, I guess, immediate into your life, and then a big one hits you, and you're like, "Holy shit! Like all my other problems didn't matter. This is what matters. I'm glad." And yeah, like I got hit by a jet ski when I was a kid, or not a
Oh
kid, but
God.
when I was 17 years old. I've said it before. It was a near death experience, but that near death experience, that 2 weeks after you get something like that, you're thinking completely different. You have a whole new look on life. Like, oh, this this cereal, it's 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 fucking amazing. Oh God!
Right.
And you're just like crying over cereal, like, oh, I would never have eaten Honey Smacks again. "Ah!" Like that whole thing. But after 2 weeks, it's gone. Then you're like, this cereal's bland. Fuck, it just tastes the same. And
Yeah,
it's your life, your expectancy on things changes. But I want people to understand that it is something that fleets away. Life is not forever. The best part about it is the fact that it does end. That just makes every more moment on this earth enjoyable. You know,
yeah, absolutely.
one of the saddest things that a lot of people don't understand is sometimes the people that smile the most are going through the worst.
Oh yeah, that's
R-
absolutely true.
the best example, Robin Williams.
Yep.
That man, nobody could tell, like, oh my God, he was so happy. I don't understand how this could have happened. It's like sometimes the people who are just the funniest and happy and don't seem like they're struggling with anything are actually struggling with so much that it can't be handled. You know, that's what makes you want to look at people differently. If you can understand how you could ever feel like crap, how you could ever feel hurt, how you could ever feel like someone has literally broken you down, then when you look at someone and you say things, do you really mean that or are you just upset? And what's going to happen to them when you say those things?
No, yeah, that's absolutely true. I think sometimes the comedians are the ones dealing with the most sadness, and that's what drew them to that, that outlet, is that they wanted to create happiness, make people laugh. Um, I mean, John Belushi, I mean, you could go down the list of troubled, comedians and artists.
I want you to write this podcast down, but I want you to write down, it's called The Honeydew with Ryan Sickler.
Okay.
So he has a older podcast with a guy named Jay Larson. They're two comedians, but they're from like Ryan's from Baltimore. But if you listen to the podcast, it's the original one was called The Crab Feast. What they do is they bring people on the podcast and like famous comedians, famous actors, famous whoever, and they talk about all the bad stories in their life and all the moments that got them there. But it comes from a comedian's perspective. So you have two comedians that are cracking jokes on them the whole time. They're talking about the worst moments in their life, and it's an overall fun time. Like they're not
Mm.
sitting there saying, "Oh, it's because you're a piece of shit." Like the one dude goes, "Yeah, I remember I got a DUI and I couldn't fly to the airport, so my mom had to mail my report card." And they just start, they go into a deep emotional thing, but they're making fun of the bad times and they're looking to make light of it and laugh at it. And that's what he does in his new podcast, like The Honeydew. And
Huh.
when he's on the podcast and stuff and he's talking, like they had Tim Dillon on there. I don't know if you know who he is.
No.
Greg Fitzsimmons. There's a bunch of famous comedians and stuff, but they're talking about all the cringy moments in your life that make you want to never ever tell anybody or just make you not even want to look back because you'll cringe. And they just crack jokes on it, and then they're all laughing and having a really good time. And it's making dark out of the light. It's one of the most, I guess, hardcore best listening podcasts I've listened to.
Oh, I'll have
And
to check it out. Yeah.
it just changes your perspective on things. Like if you just start changing your perspective a little bit, how far can you really go?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's very true, and it's not just hyperbolic when they say the way you, how is it, the quote goes, the things you look at change when you do. And it's again, it's in science. It's the observer effect, that the our whole reality is pretty much my most recent episode I'm working on right now is how it's basically a simulation, and that molecules change based on our observation of them, and this goes for life and your attitude and everything. And I could see how that podcast, like those guys probably have a very cathartic experience, telling those stories in a funny way, because it's like you're rebranding your story of what happened.
Yeah, Ryan Sickler killed his grandmom, and everyone makes fun of him on it about the podcast when he's telling the story. Everyone's like,
How did he
"Well,
kill his grandma?
yeah, that's what they say." They go, "Ryan, you killed your grandma." He goes, "No, I didn't. She was having a heart attack, and I gave her CPR, so I probably sped up the process." And it was like it was that whole thing. But he gives a story, a hard story about when he lost his dad, and he
Ah,
was like, "I was driving in a car." And my dad was having a heart attack. He said, "I need you to drive me to the hospital." And apparently, heart attacks aren't as like you think on television, where it's that imminent. It can also be something where you're experiencing severe chest pain for a while, and you have time to get to the hospital, and you have something like that. So he talks about driving his dad to the hospital when he was 16 years old. Then he goes and his dad goes, "It's this left up here." And Ryan goes, "No, it's not this left. It's the next left." He goes, "It's this left." And his dad's having a heart attack, clinching the dashboard and everything and screaming, "It's this left." He ends up passing that left and trying to turn to the next one. And as soon as he passes it, he goes, "Fuck, that was that left." So he had to go all the way back around
oh
an extra
God.
10 minutes. And then his dad ended up dying later at the hospital. But they make fun of those moments. They laugh at those moments. They turn it into a
Yeah.
joke, and it's so funny because when you laugh at the pain, sometimes when you look back and you're retelling it, as hard as it might be to retell, when you laugh at it, you get to see you know, a different perspective of it, and you feel way better.
Oh yeah, you no longer put yourself in the seat of the victim, because I bet that guy probably for at least a few years really beat himself up for missing that turn. Um, and when you take on that guilt, it's almost like a victim mentality. But instead, now he's turned it into humor, which is a great way, I think, of coping and sort of you know flipping that into where you're not just the victim that this happened to.
Well, you brought a good point up before about how there's a lot of this stuff going on with like hate culture where people are just looking to get mad at something.
Oh yeah, it's all over the place.
Well, if you look at comedians, they all change their profile. You see how they're doing jokes now? They're doing jokes just making fun of themselves because that's the safe
uh,
option. You walk up there and you tell a joke about, "Yeah, remember when I did this and then my dumb ass," and then you make fun of yourself instead of making fun of other things or observational things, because there's nobody can get mad at you for making fun of yourself.
right, that's true. Now, do you see that as a positive or a negative? Like,
I see it as a negative because
yeah,
yeah, if a joke's told right, it's right, but if it's a joke, it's a joke. I think what happened was I'm pro if you're whatever, if you're gay, if you're trans, if you're I've had a trans person on my podcast trying to explain it to me. What I don't understand it is the people that try and get away with that and try and push the envelope a little bit farther. And what I mean by that is like the types of people you'll come across that'll be like, "My name's Paul." And then like a minute later, they'll be like, "Now I'm Sheila. Now I'm Paul. Now I'm Sheila. Now I'm Paul. Now I'm Sheila." I'm like, well, what the fuck are we doing? And then like my school went nuts with it and they asked for your gender pronouns and everything, which is fine. But then this person in my class started going by their astral sign. I'm
interesting. I haven't heard of that one before.
So I'm a Capricorn. Oh, what the fuck? What? Like my teacher eventually was just like, I'm just sending out an email that says to everyone, whatever you are. That's literally what it is, to everyone and anything. That's how he would send his emails. And
Yeah.
I'm like, man, there are some people that really just they see an opening and they want to go and make it bigger and make it bigger and make it bigger. It's like, I get it. If you feel like you're hurt, you feel like you're discriminated against, you feel like whatever, then you should be in full right to be able to say something and be able to be called what you want to be called, be able to do what you want to be able to do, and as long as it's not harming anybody. But when you start seeing other people get away with something, you're like, well, then I should be able to do it. Then I should do it. You're just trying to get power, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I think it's also just an attempt to get noticed. like what we were talking about before, like getting being able to be heard. And they're probably working through whatever issues they have to do that. um those people used to kind of get on my nerves. I've kind of reached a point of like, as long as you're not trying to change my mind about something, I don't care what you go by. If you want to say you're a fish, that's that's whatever. I'll accept that. Um, talking about those comics though, I wonder how like somebody like George Carlin would be in this environment, because you
It
don't
wouldn't work.
hear. Yeah, because he made so many social observations.
It's it sucks because that's what comedians will talk about. Like it's hard to make a joke for a special or for something and then just laugh with the room. Any person that does comedy can get an easy laugh by just bringing in things that people in the room are experiencing around them, such as look at this guy in the blazer, look at him.
Yeah.
If you start doing that, but then people on Netflix and people that are like watching it on TV are like, I'm not, this isn't funny. I'm not in the room. You can't crack jokes on a room on TV or on whatever because nobody on the TV or anything is going to get it. But people in the audience will get it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't know how it's gonna read once it's out there into the, to the ether, and someone's just sitting at home. They just got off work, so they might not be in the mindset of the same people at a comedy club. Because when you go to a comedy club, you're sort of geared up, ready to laugh. And when you just throw something on Netflix or whatever, that might not be the case. So,
Well,
if you
I've talked to stand-up comics, and they always talk about how difficult it is to try and crack a joke on something and craft one out. If it's not super good, you'll get shit on. And I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
because the thing is, when you go to a comedy club, now you're dealing with people that want to go to a comedy club just to be able to overreact and try and look for something to get mad at. There was a guy, um, that actually sued a woman comedian and still suing. She was on a Joe Rogan podcast talking about it. For 2 years now, he's been suing because they did an all women's night at a comedy club. And if you're a dude and you see that, you're just like, whatever. Like, okay,
Yeah,
I don't care. I'll go tomorrow, I guess. But
right,
this
if that's not your thing.
this guy got so upset that he's been suing this woman for over 2 years now, just talking about how like I was discriminated against because of my gender, just going off. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like,
Oh my god, that's ridiculous.
it's like, why can't you just let them do that then? Like, are you going to be that upset if someone doesn't want me in there that night? Then I'm just going to go somewhere else. I'm not going to be so
Exactly.
upset to where I have to ruin their day. But it's like you were saying before, people need that conflict.
Yeah, and it seems, especially with lawsuits, like they'll sue over anything. Um, I'm one of those annoying vegans, but I don't like, I don't lose my shit over it, But I heard about these vegans that were suing Burger King because they were frying the Impossible Burger, or doing it on the same grill that the other burgers were on. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, like here is this huge corporation that's offering you an option. And if you don't want to have that cross contamination, don't go to Burger King, because 90% of the menu is going to be some kind of animal product. It's like, are you?
Now, did you do vegan for a health lifestyle change, or did you do it because you don't like meat?
So it started. No, I'm from Arkansas. I grew up as a hunter. From the time that I was 10 years old, I had a shotgun. So I didn't stop eating meat because it didn't taste good. um, I did it for health reasons. I'm 45 now, and I started putting on some weight, and so I went, vegetarian, and that didn't quite work out because I basically replaced meat with dairy. And it dawned on me when my wife had our first kid, that cows have to be pregnant to produce milk, and this is probably common knowledge to everyone else, but to me, I was like, okay, that's interesting.
It's the first time ever heard of it.
Yeah, okay, so I don't feel so obtuse now. But so watching my wife breastfeed our kid, it 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 was so difficult. Like, I mean, hats off to all the women that breastfeed their children, because she said that was harder than the childbirth experience. because you're constantly, having to either pump or um, feed the kid, because it just builds up. And not to go into too much gruesome detail, but there's potential for infections and things like this. And so I started looking into how dairy is made, and it's crazy what these animals go through to produce, you know, milk. And when I started kind of stepping back from the societal norms and looking at it like if I was an alien and I came down and was observing these humans, what would I think of this behavior? Like, they're drinking milk from another animal and then turning that into cheese and ice cream and yogurt. It just seems ridiculous.
Where's the
And
age-old question that we should be asking is who the fuck decided to drink cow milk? Like for the first time, just decided to do that. And how the hell do they know when it's going to expire? Does the cow tell them?
that's so true. But it just causes all kinds of health problems. When I cut out dairy, it was, I mean, it was insane.
That's weird that you say that though, not to cut you off, but
Yeah.
I've been recently dealing with some gastrointestinal problems that I've had to go to the doctors a couple times for, and they're trying to get me figured out if there's a disease or an intolerance that I'm dealing with. But I ate dairy a couple days ago and I haven't been to the bathroom since, and it's causing some severe amount of pain. So they're looking at like a dairy intolerance or something, and I'm like, it's weird, man, because a lot of times dairy is the stuff that kind of makes you feel bad. It's good for some people. It's good for protein, obviously. Um, but I don't see a whole lot of benefit in it besides just maybe like a good after workout or help stimulant.
Yeah, I mean, there's when it comes to the protein, I mean, all protein actually comes from plants, but when we ingest it from other animal products, we're getting it secondhand. Um, but dairy really is like sludge for your intestines. Um, when I cut that out, it nothing has more positively affected my health than when I cut out dairy. Um, and the meat was, I think that helped too. But the biggest benefit of me going vegan was just cutting out dairy. And I have a theory that we're all lactose intolerant because we don't have floppy ears and a tail. It's not meant for us, you know.
See, I like the idea of being vegan, but I'm a big fish guy. I'm basically like all seafood and that type of salad eater, but
Well,
I
you know
love
what?
eggs way too much.
Well, you could look at, I didn't go vegan overnight. I mean, it was a gradual, probably 6-year process. First, I tried the pescatarian because, like yourself, I really enjoyed, like, the seafood, salmon and halibut, things like that. Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's a much cleaner form of protein than beef and chicken for sure. Not to mention the huge environmental impacts that the animal agriculture is having on our environment.
Yeah, I got tested in my blood for freaking mercury poisoning.
Oh my God.
My
Well,
do-
that's
my doctor was like, "How many cans of tuna do you eat, bro?" I'm like, "A lot." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, you have a little bit of, I guess, above average mercury content in your blood." He goes, "I'd suggest taking a break from that for a little while." I was like, "Okay, all right, sure. Well,
oh
I'll believe it when it goes up a little bit higher because I don't think people understand or start to make changes until it's like already past the point of reversal. It's like, oh shit, I'll change it
yeah.
now. I'll change it now."
Yeah, humans are great at change when they're forced with, well, this is now affecting your health and you're shaving years off your life. Then they can do it. And the human body is amazing if we just give it the right ingredients, the right fuel, and the right sleep. It is a self-healing machine.
Literally, the liver fixes itself if you give it a month.
Yeah.
It repairs itself. My dad was an alcoholic, suffering with some liver stuff. He went clean. He's now sober, but he took a month off and he immediately started feeling way better. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's like all the stuff you consume on a daily basis that's shit, and you feel like crap, and then you take a nice poop, and then you feel flushed out. This is why cleanses are so popular because people are like, I felt like a brand new me afterwards. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
because you got all the toxins out, all that stuff. Now let's fuel it with some good stuff. Like water, even though I hate water. I'll drink anything but water. I want a coffee instead. That'll burn it all out of me.
Yeah, I kind of, I mean, I like that people do these cleanses or detoxes, but my theory is just don't fill your body with toxins. Like the reason that you feel amazingly better after a 7-day juice cleanse is because you weren't ingesting all the dairy and all the processed junk.
Yeah. I like the cleanse idea though. I really like the vegan aspect, but what really kind of challenged me on it was the fact that my buddy's vegan and me and him used to work out at like, well, I still do, but he doesn't. We used to work out at like 2 a.m.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was difficult because he's all vegan. So the way he has to get his protein, and I'm a big fitness freak. So when it comes to
Hmm.
less calories, the better. I want to hit my protein and weight, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I'm not consuming a whole bunch of calories to keep fat off, stay around 3% all year round. And I literally was like, dude, you're putting on a little bit more than me. I don't know how. Like your muscles are getting bigger. It's because you're consuming more calories. And he goes, yeah, man. He goes, you know how hard it is to get 30 grams of protein from plant protein? Unless you're taking a plant protein powder, you got to eat beans. You got to eat all these types of things, but you got to eat a large amount of it with a higher calorie content to reach that. Me, to get 20 grams of protein easy, I just opened up a can of tuna. That's 90 calories.
Yeah, I have heard that, that if for bodybuilders, it is a much different aspect. Um, there's a documentary that you might want to check out on Netflix called The Game Changers, and it's all about athletes who go plant-based. And it talks about like how they get their protein and how much their performance has changed, since they went plant-based.
What do you think about the hashtag vegan cat?
Okay, I'm out of the loop on that one. I might have to look that up.
These people that believe in feeding their cat a vegan diet and the cat dies
Oh,
after 2 years.
okay, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, they don't
Yeah,
understand that sadly the cat is probably one of the very few domesticated animals that we cannot just feed vegan food because they're naturally carnivores. So
right.
if you look at these hashtags of these cats, like Joe Rogan talks about it, they after 2 or 3 years a post gets put up and she's like, miss you Fluffy, you were a great cat. It's because they can't, they die,
Yeah.
their eye goes all wonky, they start looking like Bill Cosby, and it's it sucks because you can
Yeah,
feed a dog a vegan diet and it'll be fine, but if you feed a cat that, they're naturally predators, so it's like they need meat.
exactly. And to force an animal like that, I mean, that's animal cruelty. And the irony is that that is not a vegan um ethos. You're trying to in the exploitation of animals is one of the goals of being vegan, and to force a cat on a diet of vegetables, that's animal cruelty.
I always try and bring in the perspective, like my buddy, well, if we go out to eat or something, he'll be like picking forever on the menu because he has to make sure everything's vegan, it wasn't
Oh
cooked or
yeah.
all meat and all like that, and it does get a bit tasking where I'm sitting there like, just get a fucking water or something. But I crack jokes on him, but I understand him, and I really like his aspect of being vegan, probably much like yourself. It's the idea of not forcing it upon anybody. See, the problem is when, well, like, just like we are talking before, as soon as resistance comes up, as soon as someone starts forcing something onto us, we have a natural tendency to be combative.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
to change people into that, just bring up like, "Hey, I'm vegan. I do it because of this." And then people's minds are going to change. People are going to be like, "Oh, I see it. I get it now." Don't be like, "You're vegan meats murder," and then throw a red thing of
Right.
paint on them. It's like, we get it. But I understand that aspect of doing that though, because it's the same thing that happened with a lot of the stuff like the rights and everything that's getting crossed over. I'm like, if we look at like women's rights, anybody's rights, animal rights, whatever it is, they're making up for lost time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
many years we've been living this lifestyle that they can't do this, they can't do that, and then all of a sudden they're becoming riots and they're becoming feminist movements and going like that. When I look at a feminist person, I've came across some before, I just look at them like, you're making up for lost time.
Mm.
There was a we were people were wrong for a while, then you finally, it's like if Christmas Day comes. Okay, you can't open the presents on Christmas. You're actually gonna have to wait another month. That whole time, as soon as you get that toy and you figure out what it is, you're fucking playing all day with it, and you're playing it for like the next week and a half, like making up for lost time.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think the for me, like when I went vegan, I kind of experienced that because you sort of lift the veil. Like I had never really watched any videos of, how these factory farms treat animals, and when you start looking at it and you expose yourself to it, you you feel the tendency to criticize everyone. And I honestly think it's kind of like what Carl Jung talked about, the shadow self, where you are criticizing others for things that you saw in yourself.
Yeah. Well, we are our biggest critics, aren't we?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, one of my more popular episodes recently is talking about how you're doing better than you think. And one of my friends wrote me and said, "Man, this was such a powerful episode because we're so hard on ourselves." And I just listed all the reasons that no matter what you're going through, you're absolutely doing better than you think you are. And it's so people love hearing that. They like to get pumped up and or just being told like, "Hey, you're okay. Don't." if I think a lot of times if we had a friend that treated us the way that we do, we wouldn't hang out with that person.
Yeah. I mean, my buddy does the one thing to self-check me all the time. I really hate repeating myself. And it's still my one bugaboo. Like if I say something you don't hear me the first time, you go, "What?" I'll just won't answer back. I'll just be like, "I'm just not going to even say it anymore." And then my buddy will do that all the time to me. He'll be like, "What'd you say?" I'm like, "Dude, I texted it to you. It's still in the text thing. You can just literally read it." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "All right, now you're really trying to get at me." But he's the one person like I love that. Like we talk about loving resistance. I love that. Like he knows what's to get me. He knows when, because I know he's always got my back. I know he's there for me. I know he challenges me on things and he corrects me when I'm doing something differently. It's great to have that person in your life. I think we all need motivators like that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Somebody to call us on our stuff.
exactly. And when I asked about the vegan thing, I was talking about was it a health style changes? I started noticing that a lot with people that a lot of it was for health reasons, and there is a
Yeah.
big link to it. That's why I say what works for you is what works for you. We're living this world now where there's so many new diets out there, there's so many things, and who's to say it's all going to be relevant 5 years from now?
Oh
It's
yeah, there's all kinds of different food tribes now.
we're literally trying to hack the system right now. We're trying
Yeah.
to turn this matrix lifestyle into something manageable and better and more effective. And we might end up going the complete opposite way. We don't know
Yeah.
where the world's going to be in 10 years from now. We could be living on Mars. It's crazy to say, like, when are we going to do space travel? Maybe 100 years, 200 years from now. And the next thing you know, we're doing it. Next thing
Yeah.
you know, we're advancing to the iPhone 20, iPhone 40. You know, we're living in times where mankind feels like we're hitting a point of less resistance, so we're going to keep pressing forward. We're going to
Right.
keep moving and trying to create something new. We're going to have something come and attack us. What's really weird is you start seeing slow progression on things when a serious outbreak starts happening, such as a virus, like what's going on. And people are more focused on that now. Oh, we need to fix this. We need to correct this problem now that it's here. We need to do this. We need to do that. People's talking about the zombie apocalypse. I'm like, not too long ago, we were all worried about bath salts.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that.
And
It
then
seems like so far away because we have really short attention spans, but that people were obsessed with that a few years ago.
I always bring up the thing like when something starts happening in the government and people are all about the government now, I say there are two things the government has always been afraid of. One is the people, and two is religion. It's just never
Mm.
been able to break religion. It's never been able to test it. And then after I was saying that for so long and repeating it over and over and over again on podcasts, there was an article that came out where 5 priests at the Vatican were arrested. This was the first time in history that anything with religion had been fixed or corrected upon by the government.
Oh, really?
And
What were they arrested for?
something with mistreatment or sexual something.
Ah, yeah.
It was. I have to go back and look at the article. I can send you because it was funny because I brought it up to a priest earlier, or actually a rabbi that was on my podcast called Yolson Goldstein or something. I forgot what his name
Okay.
is. Yondison. But he was telling me like religion and all these things, and I was telling him about like the aspect of like, do you think that the government just can never break into religion? And he said, well, it's just not like that. And then I sent him that article and he just didn't answer back. I was like, yeah. I was like, because I was right. You know what I mean? It wasn't trying to prove my point, but when the people start rising up, when they start getting like, hey, is anybody paying attention to what our government's doing in this area? And then everyone starts noticing, the government starts going, hey, around this time this happened, like we're dealing with Iraq and everything.
Hmm.
PETA started attacking the government saying, what the fuck? Like you're doing this stuff and you got this happen. Then the government was like, PETA ran up or did some riot or did some protest or something. And they were like, oh, you got animals behind bars on animal crackers. And the government took the bars away. So now if you look at animal crackers, they're not behind bars anymore.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I have mixed emotions about them. I think they might have good intentions, but they're not picking their battles wisely.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the fact is, as soon as they fought for the animal cracker thing, the government's like, okay, we'll take them off behind the bars. We'll do that. Then they got that passed, and PETA was acting like it was a big win. They were going around like, hooray, we did it. And then the government was like, you guys want a small little battle on a giant war. We're doing
y-
shady shit over here. If that's going to keep your
right.
attention for a little bit, we're fine with doing that. But PETA's the same thing with just trying to make up for lost time. They're trying to do
Yeah.
stuff and they're attacking things in an outlandish way because that's what happens. It's the same thing. There's a parody religion. I don't know if you've dived into heavy with these, but I'm an ordained minister to the United Church of Bacon. That's right. I paid $45 and it took me an hour and a half at my Maryland courthouse to be able to get that, and I'm proud of it. It hangs above my college diploma.
Oh, that's hilarious. Is this anything like the flying spaghetti monster?
Pastafarianism,
Yeah.
I am still awaiting on my license for that. I still have not been accepted into the Pastafarianism community, but
Really?
I have been almost arrested at the MDA for trying to take a picture with a pasta strainer on my head.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's apparently one of the things is they cannot tell you, I guess, to that you can't use a religious hat or a religious piece of clothing in a driving vehicle photo or something. You're allowed to have it on you as long as it doesn't block your mouth or something. And yeah, I got my pasta strainer taken away, but that's a whole nother story down the road. But it goes into the aspect of, I started diving really heavily into parody religions when I found out, when I was walking on my boardwalk, there was a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses that were yelling at people, telling them they were going to go to hell. So I have my headphones in, and imagine you hear someone say, "You're going to hell." So
Yeah.
I popped my headphone out and I looked at him. I was like, "What'd you just say?" And he goes, "You're going to hell if you don't turn to Christ. If you don't believe that he can save you, you will never hit salvation." And I'm like, you understand that everybody in this world is not religious, right? You understand people came from different backgrounds, come from different cultures, and might have a different way of thinking than you do. That might not be exactly like you thought of. Well, if you turn now, you could be saved. And he tries to hand me a pamphlet. I just looked at him, put my headphone back in my ear, and walked away. Then
Yeah.
I signed up for the United Church of Bacon. And the reason why was, when I looked at that religion, I started diving heavily into religion. I started trying to read every single piece of religion out there as possible. And I found a thing called parody religions, where I did my first podcast on my other podcast called, um, it was about the spaghetti monster. And I realized that Pastafarianism, as ridiculous it might sound, with its stripper volcano and lakes filled with beer, it really just highlights one of the most beautiful aspects. And the reason why he created it, a guy from Harvard in 2006, was because it was supposed to outlie the factor of the education system really focusing on Christian religion and not looking at other backgrounds of religions. And he believed that it all should be taught fairly in each education system.
Right. If you're going to include any of it, you should include all of it, all the
A-
major religions of the world.
And that's just, yeah, that could be someone taking a rope and trying to run a mile with it, or, trying to go as far as they possibly can. Like if I look at a butterfly and see it almost get hit by a car, I could take a religious experience from that and be like, oh, that's a meaning for life. We're all just barely getting missed by that car. But
Mm.
I could do
Yeah.
that. But when I looked at the United Church of Bacon, I looked at it and it was a safeguard for atheists. How many times
Right.
did a hardcore religious person ask you what your religion was and you say, I don't believe in anything? And they go, you're going to hell if you don't believe in anything. You're just going to go to hell. That used to be the thing back in the day.
Yeah.
So they created the United Church of Bacon, where if someone asks you what your religion was, you just say, "I'm under the Church of Bacon." People are like, "What is that?" It's like it's a safeguard for atheists.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
but that was the old way of thinking. Now we're in a new society where with millennials and everything, religion's not the primary thing anymore.
No, they're actually closing a record number of churches because, millennials aren't going.
And it
Yeah.
started all after the Vatican got arrested with 5 priests.
Yeah. I think that, and also just the access, people don't have to go to church anymore to have a religious experience and to gain knowledge. You've got all of the world's information right at your fingertips now. And, people don't necessarily need this invisible sky daddy, to feel good about themselves anymore. And like yourself, I'm not a religious person, but I don't attack people for it. Um, I saw a funny quote the other day that said, "Religions are like penises. It's fine if you have one, but don't stick it in my face." And I feel like a lot of, zealots will do that. They feel like, they're on a crusade, to save your immortal soul. And like that guy that was confronting you, he probably doesn't know what the term worldview even means.
Well, what's really weird is where I've talked to people that lost their religion and people that are hardcore Christians or something, but they choose to do it at home and try and do I've talked to people that do a podcast on it. Shout out to the Wandering Pilgrims. Um, it's because church is a community organization. It's a hive mind. When you start thinking
Yeah.
differently than the group, you start bringing up questions. They ask you to leave. They don't like the questions being raised because it shakes somebody's belief. But when you don't get answers to questions, you start asking even more questions. And the thing is, the whole reason why church is still popular today and religion is not just because it's old, it's because it's a community, it's an organization. It's a good factor being around people that believe in the same thing you're around. If you start hanging out with people that are all podcasters and love podcasting and talk about the same things, you want to be around those people. You want to surround those people around you. But you don't want to ever go so far to the point where you get disassociated with something. When we as people try and hang out in groups and then we try and exclude somebody because they have a thought or they have something different that goes against your belief or something, you're completely isolating the main thing that makes us human, the primal aspect of that we're all supposed to care for one another.
Oh yeah. That's really what we're here for, right? We only have, I mean, we're on this rock covered with water spinning in the universe like, and there's doesn't seem to be any other life beyond us that we can see anyway. Like all we have is each other. Like we got to take care of ourselves.
I'm more worried about Mr. Rogers.
Oh really?
I
We're
swear, every time I watch something with Mr. Rogers in it, and especially that movie that came out, and this I just kind of made me think of it when I was looking at your Instagram and saw that you had Mr. Rogers' picture on there.
Yeah.
I think he's like Bill Cosby.
You think you need to
I
watch, have you
I
seen the documentary though,
I
the
haven't. I
okay.
look, my mom got so pissed off at me when I said that. And I said, seriously, that guy looks like a freak. He looks like he's got something hidden inside of him, just the way he acts. And it just strikes me. And I've been really good to tell if someone's a bad person, if someone's like just by meeting them. It's called being empathic, which I know
Oh
you've
yeah.
talked about. Yeah. Well, I'll get readings off people by walking around. Like this is why I go to work out early in the morning. I do all my stuff early in the morning, grocery shopping, everything. Because being around people, I get too much negative energy, and this is where my thoughts
Yeah.
on people and everything I've said in this podcast has really came from these feelings that I get from people. And there's a thing called truth wizards where there's a percentage of the population. You can look it up. It's a actual like thing and like a giant there's a test you could take online and everything too, not like those horoscope readings or anything. It's not like that. But apparently most judges, people that tend to be put in that position that are actually truly trying to do their job, the ones that are very good at their job, are known as truth wizards, which are people that can sense bullshit.
Hmm.
People that might have done bullshit a lot in their life where they can tell when it arises, but I can tell when someone's giving me a story.
Yeah.
I've had to end a couple podcasts before where someone's just sitting there not really giving me the real answers. I'm like, like, do you want to? Are you trying to psych me out here? Are you trying to fake me out? I get it, but I just don't understand it. But
Yeah.
it's really easy to tell, and I've went with it sometimes. I've had someone tell me, I can't really talk about what I do for a living, and I'm like, why? Like, oh, is it something secret? I work in the secret parts of NASA, and I'm like, okay, so what do you want to talk about? Well, I want to talk about Xbox, and then he goes into a whole thing about berating about video games, and I'm like, dude, you just gave me a bullshit story, and I don't even know who you really are.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though you get the predator vibe from Mr. Rogers.
I do. I think he's got it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood because all the pets are in my closet vibe.
I would challenge you to watch the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor and just see if you still come away with that.
I'm gonna
Cause
have to, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Well, no one
But
thought Pee Wee Herman was a freak, and then he ended up getting arrested in a movie theater for jacking off. So,
well, I mean, to be
ah!
fair, to be fair, he was in a theater where that was okay. I mean, I have more respect for him than I do the pedophile priest.
That's what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying Mr. Rogers is a priest. I just said he's an. You like that? You like that? And take out the pedophile part. No, I'm just saying he strikes me as some guy that has some dirty things about him, and it really brings into perspective, like the people that are porn stars, the people that are open about their shit, that don't like. Well, how do you like? How do you like? What do you like? Well, I like to jack off while someone hits me in the head with a brick. It's like, holy shit, really? Like you're just open about that? Yeah. The one question you have to ask is when you look at Jim, and Jim is working the 9 to 5 life, has a family and kids, wears his shirt tucked in all the time, slick back hair, beautiful comb, no hair out of place, meets his neighbors, talks to the mailman, talks to everybody around town, does a bunch of community organizations. That guy's probably a freak. That guy probably likes it very, very dirty, or maybe likes being choked. I don't know. But I'm not going to judge him upon that. But I'm saying we all have something about ourselves that we try and hide from others. The things we do when the doors are shut and no one's in the room. That's the only time you're ever comfortable, is when you're in your room, the door's shut, and that's it. You can take your
Yeah.
full clothes off and be naked. So I'm like, there are people like that choose to be like that in public, not naked in public, which there are people like that. Like, shout out to the homeless man in the beginning of the podcast. But there are people out there that don't like showing their shit, like that like showing their shit
Right.
and don't like showing their shit.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about not being afraid to be who you are, in front of people.
But there's obviously a time and place for it.
Sure, absolutely.
I bet you weren't expecting the Mr. Rogers at the end of the podcast, were you?
Right. Yeah, you threw a curveball at me there. Because I granted I'm not empathic, but after watching that documentary, I kind of think he was a badass. Just in terms of like what he would do from, you know, social perspectives, his views on racism and uh, accepting people that because he was an ordained Presbyterian minister, which I had no idea about. And
I didn't
you
even
know,
know he was a priest. I thought you were joking about that.
no, and maybe that maybe that's why you get the predator vibe, but no, he really was. And there was a guy on his show, the police officer that was black. He was an openly gay man. So this is a dude like in the 60s that allowed this openly gay man to be on his show. I mean, that was a different time.
Have you ever
Uh,
seen the Bill Cosby documentary?
I haven't.
That'll change your thoughts on it. And then you end
Oh
up
yeah.
finding out like 5 years later that he did all this nasty shit.
Oh, so
Yeah.
he was sort of. I know he had a lot of philanthropy going on. Probably to try to.
Apparently, from a security guard's perspective, that used to tuck Bill Cosby in at night, like in a cocoon, like how you wrap yourself in a blanket and someone tucks it under you.
Uh-huh.
He used to do that and read Bill Cosby something to go to sleep.
Interesting.
And he also used to pay people to watch him eat curry. Now, I heard that from somebody, so I wouldn't, I heard that from some famous dude who talked to one of his bodyguards. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think, I don't know, people tend to hide behind something and they just never want to let that out. I just got that
Right.
sense from Mr. Rogers. Is he? Maybe not, but every time I see his face on the screen, I'm like, there's no fucking way. But this does bring in a weird point. Do you think it's strange that they made a movie about Adolf Hitler?
See, I'm out of the loop. Is this one about the Is this a new one?
It's
Something
a
about
new one that
rabbit.
it's a new one that came out that I swear to God wasn't even in theaters longer than a week. Yeah, but it was the Jojo the Rabbit thing where he
Jojo
has
Rabbit.
his
Yeah.
imaginary friend was Adolf Hitler.
I heard about this. I haven't seen a trailer or anything, but when my friend was explaining the premise to me, it sounded just like out of left field.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying. I mean, Hollywood's obviously not thinking of anything super creative, but you think that movie wouldn't be able to get played today? But
Yeah.
the fact is, does that change the perspective? Like I always tell people, like you think someone's really bad or someone's the worst person that ever have lived, and I'm like, did you see it from their perspective though?
Yeah, because every person is justified from their vantage point. Everybody is in their mind, whether it's Al Qaeda, a Nazi, whomever, like when they get up in the morning, they think they are doing the right thing. And that's hard for some people to accept, but it actually allowed me to not have so much anger towards people that maybe didn't agree with me. Is that, you know what, this guy, he's he might seem like a horrible person to me, but he's just a human trying to do what he thinks is right.
Hey, I learned about that in a podcast, dude. I had one of my episode 100 something. It was with oh God, I can't remember his name. He was a private school teacher, and we were talking about something, and he does a debate podcast. So he was kind of trying to debate me, but it was weird because he brought up a point. He was like, "I don't think kids should get free lunches," and I said,
Whoa.
yeah, that's what I said. I said, "Hold on, you don't think kids should get free lunches?" And he goes, "No, I think it's stupid." And I was like, "What? Wait a minute. If a kid's starving, you don't think he should get a free lunch?" And they go, "No, kids should not get a free lunch." And I started thinking, like, ended up being silent, and I was like, "Oh, oh, oh, I get it now." And I'm like, "I'm coming from a public school background. You're coming from a private school background." And he goes,
uh,
"Yeah, kids pay $16,000 to go to school here." Like for a
I
year.
see.
Kids are flying in on jets, kids are coming in on helicopters, and you're telling me they can't fucking pay for a lunch? And I'm like, oh, that makes more sense when kids are ordering Chipotle and getting it delivered. But from a public school perspective, some kids don't even have money for new clothes, new
Oh
shoes. They end up
yeah.
wearing holes in shoes. And I brought that in there, and we ended up getting it solved, like the whole thing. He's like, oh, no. I meant in private schools. I'm like, yeah, see, there's misunderstanding, but it's two different perspectives coming in on a problem.
Oh yeah.
That's important to have, but you got to make sure you highlight both perspectives before you go off and start arguing and yelling, because then nothing gets solved.
Right. Yeah. You two were coming from two completely different worldviews, and but you probably agreed
Yeah.
at the end of on the point.
I mean, I agreed. I was like, yeah, if you're paying $50,000, $60,000 to go to school and you're flying in on jets and you're ordering Chipotle and doing this thing, if you shouldn't get free lunch. I get that. Okay, that's kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
cheating the system a little bit. But for people that can't pay for it, obviously deserve it. And that was that was a major thing I try and incorporate in my life, is the fact that you need to be open minded and try and understand everybody's perspective, and don't get into an argument, but come to a conclusion.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's a good way to look at it, man.
You know what's funny, Brad?
What's that?
I don't think you thought this podcast was going to go this way.
Well, I'll be honest. This is the first time I have been a guest or on any podcast.
Fuck,
So,
you picked a hell of a podcast to be a guest on.
so I'm diving in the deep end.
That's like saying I want to watch a family movie and then someone suggests, let's go see Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I kind of go where the universe takes me. So you threw out that comment on one of my posts and listened to a couple episodes, and I thought, yeah, this sounds like it would be interesting.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate you, Brad, for coming on the podcast, and I really want to give you here a minute at the end if you want to say something about your podcast, if you want to shout it out there, if you got any things that you thought about this one.
Well, I've like I said before, I've enjoyed getting to know your podcast, and especially after this conversation. You don't just, I think, say what your guest wants wants you to say. You're not a people pleaser like that. So I enjoy that authenticity that you have. Um, so kudos to you on that. Um, But yeah, if anybody wants to check out my little podcast, it's kind of the opposite of what you do because mine is all self-centered. You sort of have somebody else and have a dialogue where mine is just sort of an ego trip for for whatever's going on in my overly caffeinated brain. But yeah, anybody can check me out at the coffeebuzzpodcast.com.
What do we mean by ego trip?
Well, I guess I that's sort of my self-deprecating sense of humor, but my podcast, I kind of look at it like my therapy. Um, so
That's how I do it too. I understand that one. Mine just
yeah,
my form of therapy is just trying to get a conversation with someone. Like this one was so like I feel energized afterwards. You know what I mean? It just
yeah,
it was good because I got to learn something about somebody, and at the same time, I loved how like we could easily have a conversation without even not having any interaction before this.
that's true. Yeah, for anybody listening, like we literally talked for like 20 seconds before he started recording, maybe not even that long.
That was just so I can get your last name spelled correctly, and I ended up
Right.
saying it fucking wrong as soon as I introduced you.
It's all good, man. It's all good. It's been fun.
But I really appreciate you, man, coming out and doing the podcast. I suggest people go find his links, go check out his podcast. He does, obviously, it is difficult to listen for. I mean, we've almost been going for close to 2 hours. So it's like, it's hard to listen to one of those things, you know what I mean? But he's got good episodes of good content, kind of keeps it to the point, and I really, really like it. And I really appreciate you, Brad, for coming on and doing it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode.